There's a copy of the vote. Approve this, yes.
We're gonna call the meeting to order,
No.
7:33 p.m. Everybody rise and take your pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lori, we'll call for attendance.
Michael?
Here.
Ken?
Here.
Kelly?
Here.
Sandy? Here. Lori? Here.
Approved consent agenda.
Move the original agenda first.
Oh, I missed it. Need a motion.
If there's no amendments to the agenda, I make a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Michael beat you to it.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, approval of the consent agenda.
No, we need to vote on that first.
I'll vote. All in favor to approve the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Motion carries.
Yes.
Okay, now approval for the consent agenda.
If there are no modifications, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right.
Motion carries. I don't know if I want to ask this question. Okay, open session. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so. Oh, wait. Do you want to do the fire runs?
Oh, you can address that during the open
Okay.
session.
Open session for anybody wishing to address the board. Nobody?
Matt can.
Matt, do you want to address the board?
If you'd like me to.
Yes, I do.
My name is Matt Cottrellville, for those of you who don't know me. I'm on the planning commission, and I was privileged to work with Carly on a few field trips here. We went to the fire department. There were some concerns and questions regarding the fire authority and my history of 25 years in fire service. I retired as a fire chief. She thought maybe I could be of some help. So we reviewed not only the contracts that we are currently under, the Marine City Fire Authority. We are in contract with Cottrellville Township to take care of our western side of the township. And then we also have a third contract with a billing company, Acumen Billing Company, which is a long-term company that does specifically billing for police, fire, ambulance work, and so forth. In reviewing our old contract, which expired approximately 2010, where Marine City covered our fire protection, we would pay a fee to them and then pay, you might say, a user fee per run. We paid, I believe it was $200. That ended in December 2010. We went into this fire authority, which I'm sure was a long and in-depth, and I wasn't involved in any of that, wasn't even knowledgeable, but to be very honest, until just currently reviewing some of the old literature and the contracts. So we entered into that agreement with the Marine City Fire Authority. East China, Marine City, and ourselves are involved in this. Four townships got together, came up with this plan. We have a player now and a voice in it. It was one of the benefits of it, which is our supervisor now, who sits at all these meetings and has some input as to what they do and things that happen amongst that fire department now, whereas before we did, we had the contract, they told us what they were going to do. So there's some pluses and minuses. One of the big things they talked about is in the future, maybe having a Southeastern Alliance or county department. Pretty important. I went where I came from in Macomb County, where I work, St. Clair Shores. We try to do the same thing with increasing costs and all the issues that we've all been aware of. If you can not duplicate services and come up with a better program for your constituents, people you serve, you can probably get further ahead. And that's what I think the future here, at least the people are hoping that it might happen, is that 5-10 years away, time will tell. But, so, basically, that's what we have, is the fire authority, the West Side Ira Township, takes care of us. They computed costs. Under the old contract, we paid approximately $40,000 in 2010 was the last, 43,000, like, somewhere in that ballpark. They compute now the run volumes divided up amongst the 4 participants, come up with a percentage. They use a 3-year average on their runs. So the numbers I'm using, and I get from the treasurer's office in Marine City, 2011, we had 28% of the runs were to our township. So then they decipher a bill. That bill was about $80,000. I think a lot of people went, wow, that's double what we had. Yeah, and they have a fee schedule. So not only the township paid that amount of money, but users of the system had to pay a fee for that use. And that could be based on time, the hours they were there, the vehicles and so forth and so forth. There's a regular schedule that's in the contract. I think that's surprising to some, but we don't have a fire department, we don't have a specific millage for it, so it's what was agreed upon. The theory on that was, let's say we pay a flat $80,000 for this year, the revenue collected then through your insurances, homeowners insurance, would be collected and then given back to the township and offset costs. The problem we found when we were talking document billing was some people, be it hardships or just difficulty in collecting, we had a large amount of money, approximately $16,000, that wasn't collected that year, so then the townships absorbs the cost. So instead of $80,000 and take away the 16, and you're at 64,000, we're still at 80 plus. So those are some of the issues and concerns I think that our board obviously will have to address and look at. The billing company actually said, well, maybe you could get a collection agency, hire one to follow up and lack of better words, follow up with trying to collect some of that money. That's up to the township and so forth. I spoke with the Ira Township chief last night, and Clay Township chief. I was at a Lions Club dinner last night on Harson's Island. They were there also, and they said, no, maybe a millage would be right for the township. That again, that's a long proposal and something that our board would have to review, but could help offset costs to the overall citizens. Instead of a user fee, is what they're saying, how a millage specific to a fire, and that would take care of all of our costs, and there would no out of pocket other than taxes. So it really is out of the pocket, but it's in taxes, and there's no user fee when you call. So we have some options, but and not to go on and baffle you, and we are under contract with Marine City Fire Authority till 2035. We have input with that, with our supervisor sitting on that board, and as they want to progress and work out any issues, that's what they're there for, and that's why they meet monthly. We are in contract with Ira Township, who takes care of that side, and the reason that was, people ask, well, why do we have both? It's because response times. In the fire services, as some of you may know, or some might not, fire service, they say fires double every 60 seconds. In a medical field, the American Red Cross says 4 to 6 minutes, if you have a heart attack and no one performs CPR on you, you would have some serious brain deficiencies because you didn't have any oxygen to your brain. So what you want for your people that you represent is good coverage, and IRA can get to the west side of our township faster than Marine City, so that's why that other agreement was in play. And IRA, which we found out, and Carrie and I sat and spoke with them, it was just around the holidays, just after maybe Christmas, there was a fire on Mayor, and they were there within 7 minutes. IRA really has a pretty neat plan, I thought. It's referred to as automatic aid. When the 911 call went out to IRA, it also goes out to the neighboring communities, Clay, New Baltimore, and Algonac, and they automatically respond. They don't wait for you to get there and say, come here. They were automatically dispatched. So when he pulled up to that scene in 7 minutes, he had multiple vehicles, over a dozen people that were fighting the fire on, and they contained it to a garage and part of the roof. So exceptional coverage, I think, and again, my hats out to the people in play here who made those things happen. They're looking out for the best interests of the people here. So in general, that's where we're at right now as far as coverage. I know it's a lot, and as we say, we put a lot of time into visiting and going through books and making umpteen phone calls and knowing there's a few more things we have to look into, or we probably will, just because it's good for the citizens of this township.
Thank you. Did anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, did you say the contract with Marine City was to 2035?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it reviewed every 5 years? I mean, that's a really long contract.
No. It was a 25-year contract.
Wow.
Where's the fire?
3 years of fire?
I was 3 and so was Acumen 3, yes.
What happens if we have to buy equipment, or they have to buy equipment? You know, like, I don't know how much a fire truck would be, but.
And if I can.
Okay.
And that was one of the, I think, the benefits to us, when you think 80,000, it is a lot of money. I'm not saying it isn't by any means, but a fire truck, in 2006 or 7, I spec'd out a fire truck for the city of St. Clair Shores. Budgeted over 2 years, and it was delivered in 2009. And it was a nothing, plain Jane, as they called it, fire truck. It was over $500,000 at that time. That was one truck. I had 3 stations, 50 people, and I had 2 trucks in each station, plus a ladder truck, which is over $1 million. So extremely expensive. What Marine City does is they have all those vehicles and they allowed us to use that. So new things that are bought and so forth, I believe, are put into the budget and we all take care of those expenses. Past equipment, it just became ours and they're using it to do it. I did find out they have a tanker vehicle. And to me, I mean, St. Clair Shores doesn't have tankers because we have water systems. They said, well, we do too in Marine City. We have hydrants and so forth. We needed that vehicle so that we could protect Cottrellville Township and the townships that don't have water. So that was an asset that they had to acquire prior to this agreement, because they did help us prior to the authority. And if they didn't, they could obviously sell that off. So now we're all under that and buy it together collectively. And that's what they do with their budget.
Do they allow a time period for you to pay off something like that?
Oh yeah, most of those are amortized over 25 years and so forth. Yeah, you don't pay it up front. We budget it and then the payment's off, or the way finance does it. But if you're fortunate enough, maybe there are cities that can do it, but to save that kind of money, it'd be pretty difficult.
My husband had a brush pile. He's been waiting for the right kind of a day to burn. You know, farmers that clear their fence lines. I called Ira as per what we're supposed to do. I don't think they get many calls because I had to explain to him why I was calling, you know. Just to let you know, we're gonna burn a brush pile, don't send a truck out, so. But he was nice enough, it was just that I kinda had to explain the whole thing to him, so. Now they know. Did anybody else have any more questions?
I have a quickie. I was going to bring this up at our planning commission meeting. Upon investigation and doing a little bit of talking, I find out that I would like to know if the Board of Trustees could possibly investigate having Marine City or Clay Township Police Department in here again to talk again about entering into a contract. Because I understand, mostly, I'm interested in protecting people, but the biggie, one of the biggies is, we spend a whole lot of time over at the Planning Commission doing, making ordinances that we have no teeth into. And if we could have a police contract with a bona fide, if you may, bona fide contract with the police department, we would have teeth to our ordinances, so the police could go up there and issue tickets for something that's going wrong. So I would, just request that possibly they could invite them in so we could go over that again. That's all.
We can do that. We will look into that. I will try to do it in a timely fashion.
Thank you.
Back to the fire authority, and I think it's something that we all have to look into. Because originally, the fire authority was with the understanding we would include IRA, and IRA was supposed to be part of it. That's my understanding. I don't know if that's information that we received. But now we're kind of split the two expenses with the thought that we were going to do a fire authority for our township. And so, I mean, I think that's something we really need to address, the separate entities. Okay, IRA takes care of part of the township, the other part of the township, we're all paying for this. We will be included with expenses that Marine City incurs. And it just seems very complicated to me, that it should be much simpler than that.
Like, we want Ira to our house.
Oh, we do, I want IRA, I don't have a problem with that, and that was way before they even started talking about it. They might have been thinking about the fire authority, but they weren't discussing it. And then when they started discussing the fire authority, and IRA was supposed to be part of it, apparently IRA backed out of it for whatever reason. And that's because they went with Clay and Albany. And that's concerning to me, because now it's two separate entities, we're all paying for the two separate entities, and I'm concerned about the expenses that Marine City will incur with just ourselves and Marine City being the fire, it's just the two, right?
East China and East China.
Oh, East China and China, okay. So, anyway, it is a point of interest that everybody talks about.
Well, Ira, Clay Township, and Algonac are now working together to form their fire authority. And the reason why, which we've had with the chief for the fire department for Marine City, and spoke with the chief of the fire department for Ira, and both of them agree that having Ira and their boundaries that they patrol for Cottrellville is a matter of time. And they have documentation in that, because it is better for our residents to have Ira patrol that district so
Right.
they can get there quicker. Okay,
My
so
question-
we just want one entity, so do you want the fire department
Well,
to
my
get there
question is,
10 seconds later? when
Now we're gonna
you-
have two fire authorities? And we're gonna have to be
That's what they're
participating in two fire
Well,
authorities?
but then it's a matter of, then let's just have one, so if they're 20 seconds later getting to your house because you want one, I'd rather have two.
No, I'm
that
just
they can-
thinking, is there an alternative besides being in the fire authority?
They are gonna,
That's the only alternative.
they're developing theirs.
So that's the only way we can
Unless we
serve,
get our own fire department.
that's the only way you get service from them is if you're part of the authority.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's, because, well, they haven't, they're
So you-
developing theirs, correct, Matt? They were in talks of, and I think, I don't even know if Casco was part of it, but I know Clay Township, Algonac, and Iowa were looking into starting a fire authority.
So you can't still contract like we were in the past once they had the authority?
We haven't talked about that with them yet. We'll see.
Okay, well, it's just
We can.
different. Things
Because
to question,
I
ponder.
would think that they were gonna say no, because that's why they're a fire authority, which exactly, then we're stuck. Okay, well,
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add to that, no, it is a good point, and obviously if they come up with an authority, then we aren't solely with IRA anymore because they're in the authority, just like we are here. But the chiefs had mentioned that to me last night, and I spoke with them, and the chief has spoken to you and I when we were in IRA about a pilot station at Starville and Shea. And I guess that's old history here and old talks. We own some property there. And they mentioned that they have vehicles both in IRA and in Clay that they could house there if we were to entertain that. But I don't believe anybody can realistically think that would happen within a very short period of time. That would be an expense, that would be a long drawn out agreement. But it's something that I'm sure in your time you will probably have to address that, or at least look at it. It'll come up. And it's probably beneficial to the community.
so it's still a work in progress, but we tried to investigate as many questions and find as many answers to those questions that were possible with the billing and things like that. And now, a little more informed, we can work on, at least we decreased it a little bit, and now we can look into some more issues to try to condense it and critique it. That's the goal. Okay, are we ready to move on? Unfinished business, there isn't any unfinished business. New business. Obligations of the township regarding the waterfront park. We copied letter of intent and the ballot for members of the audience. Did a lot of work on this. And then, in my conclusion, and I asked our attorney, our township attorney, if he would look into it as well to make sure. Because being what it says on the ballot and what was voted, there's so many different ways to look into it. We need to know what we're legally obligated to do because of what was on the ballot. The ballot was approved by the residents for us to acquire the park. But the interpretation, anybody can read it a different way, so ask the attorney to look at it, and what did you come up with, John?
Okay. Just a quick history on this, looking at the records here, that the first record that I reviewed was back in March of 2010, when the St. Clair County Parks and Recreation Commission approved, pursuant to a request by Cottrellville Township, probably to originated probably with our Parks and Rec Commission, but to match up to a grant up to $100,000 for the purchase of riverfront property for the purposes of riverfront access to the St. Clair River on behalf of the Parks of Cottrellville Township. Subsequently, there obviously were some negotiations and discussions, and a letter of intent was entered into, which I think you have a copy of, on July 28th, 2010. And the purchase price was agreed to. There would be $435,000. It involved 4 parcels. The township agreed during the pendency of pursuing the potential acquisition of this riverfront property and the property on the other side of the river road for purposes of parks. Agreed that they would withdraw, they would take out the property was in danger of a foreclosure from 2008 taxes, property taxes. The township agreed that only for the point of keeping it out of foreclosure, they would see that that was paid for the purpose of keeping that out. They also agreed to some conditions with respect to the disconnect of the utilities on the parcels, and discontinuation of the cost of that, and also the agreement that name or identification of the seller's deceased parents. This is all considerations for the purposes of keeping the potential acquisition available should the township residents decide that they would do this. In addition, there would also be some additional costs for land surveying, staking, environmental aspects. That would be all preparation to make sure that you weren't buying something like buying where the landfill used to be or something of that nature. That was put on the ballot on November 2nd, 2010. That ballot was a governor's election, a regular election. And the reason for that would be is that it would have been done under the MCL 41.429. That is the authority for the purchase of, by a township, of land abutting upon navigable waters that they could acquire for that purpose for the use or benefit of the public. That requires that it be done in a general or special election, and that 3/5 of the registered voters voting approve it. Okay, and in this case, that election took place. There were 1,195 registered voters that cast their ballots. 760 said yes, 435 said no. Therefore, and it was certified election results on November 5th, 2010. That means that 63, almost 64% approved the proposal, so it met the 3/5 requirement. The ballot proposal itself put the question pursuant to the statutory authority that the township shall purchase the property, and if they voted yes, but however there was a condition attached that said no general fund expenditures, no township millage, and no township tax. But it could be if it was provided for the acquisition cost by grants or other funding sources. So the township cannot use general fund expenditures, township millage, or tax to pay for the acquisition. Subsequent to the approval by the voters, the township in March 9th submitted the grant application to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. And they pegged the total cost at $450,000. Essentially that requesting the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund to put up $337,000, $100,000 of local match funding, and $13,000 for acquisition costs, which would be the typical if you were purchasing property, you would want to see that you had proper title, you had a survey, you had the environmental studies done so that you knew what you were purchasing. And subsequent to that, the township went ahead and met their conditions for discontinuing the utility expenses on the 4 parcels, as well as paying the taxes, about $17,800 for the 2008 taxes to take it out of foreclosure to keep the parcel alive for purposes of this. On August 22nd, 2012, the DNR sent a letter saying that they basically granted the award of the $337,000 for the purchase. Subsequent to that, title work was ordered in October 2012, and subsequent to that, there was a resolution by the board pursuant to this agreement to go forward. And then on January 4th, 2003, they signed land acquisition project agreement with the state. And on January 18th, 2003, the County Parks and Rec confirmed their willingness to match, essentially put $50,000, and the township would then be required to put $50,000 towards this acquisition. Since that time, I've had discussions with the township officials on this issue, and also I was contacted by the seller's attorney with respect to this, and I also spoke with him today, as well as the seller himself with respect to this matter. The township board really the decision has been made by the ballot proposal. Pursuant to the statutory provision, and pursuant to that ballot proposal, the township as a whole, in terms of their electorate, made the decision to purchase this property, to acquire it, but under those conditions, that it would not involve general fund expenditure, township millage, or tax. So it'd have to be done by grants. The grants, basically from the county and from the state, are in place. And the only balance is how is this to be paid by the township itself if it cannot use those 3 items, which I mentioned. In discussions with the seller and his attorney, they are willing to entertain the payment of those match funds over a period of time from future payments made by the county Parks and Rec, which is another funding source. It's not the township millage, it's another funding source. And I talked to Mark Grosho, who is the director of the County Parks and Recreation, and he said that he did not foresee that as a problem as far as they were concerned, because that's been done previously. So essentially, if an agreement can be worked out with the seller, that the balance of the matching funds, and it was my position that the taxes that were paid for the 2008 are credit to the purchaser at time of closing, and that those monies are credited to us as already part of our donation to the purchase price. And so the balance, which was probably in the area of $35,000, then has to be paid, or at least has to be contributed to the seller. And if the seller is willing to take that over time, and let's say, for example, a dedication of, let's say it's $35,000, 5 years, $7,000 a year, and the county Parks and Rec is willing to dedicate that as the millage from them that would be paid, then, in my opinion, the requirements of the ballot proposal are met, and the decision has already been made. Now, if the seller is not agreeable to some kind of deferment on the terms of the payment of the balance that's owed for the township's match, then that's a different issue. There may not be, there's not necessarily another alternative funding source, and it may not follow through. But the board's decision is not whether they approve of this or not. That's already been decided. It's just whether the matching funds can be done in accordance with the ballot proposal. And if the seller is willing to do that, it can be done. So I think that that's, otherwise, you're violating the ballot proposal and/or the agreement. So one other item is that my understanding also is, and I think that some of you may have been present, but I've also heard this from from the Parks and Recreation, County Parks and Rec Commission, that the National Oceanic Atmosphere Administration is willing to put it towards $1 million towards the restoration of that parkfront property to make it into a offshore reconstruction, something akin to what they're doing up in Marysville. So that's a consideration that we would be eligible for that grant for those improvements. Obviously, that doesn't happen if there's no park, no public park. There has to be a public park, of course. So, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Did anybody have a question?
The
Yes.
surveying and title of those issues that were done, in the beginning, before it was done, those were paid by general fund, correct?
No, they came out of the Parks and Rec fund.
Well, I was on the Park and Rec committee, and we couldn't spend that money. We weren't getting the money to even enhance this park. And the money that we would get from the county, which basically was to enhance parks. Now, whether that had been documented and tucked away to be put for something, because we were, we kept saying to them, look, if you don't get a grant without matching it. I mean, nobody gives it to you totally free. So you've got to. So if you want to take that money and put it in an escrow so that we can let it build to be able to match it, that's a different story. But you can't just go out and buy something and then all of a sudden come back and say, well, you're not using any general fund money to pay anything or any of the costs. But so it's kind of a double-edged sword when you're telling me it came out of the Park and Rec money, because supposedly that money was really general fund money.
It's not. It's dedicated for a purpose.
It's
General
dedicated.
fund money is not dedicated money. It's just like the water fund. The water fund is dedicated. You can't use the water fund for dedication of, let's say you can't use it for general fund purposes. Parks and Recreation money, the township is authorized to make expenditures for Parks and Rec. They're also authorized, there's different means by which they can do things. One is that they could do it by a millage, they can do it by a bond proposal. There's all kinds of, the township definitely has authority to run Parks and Rec. If they budget money for Parks and Rec, that's not general fund money, that's budgeted money for Parks and Rec. That's a dedicated amount. They can't be used for other purposes. So if the Parks and Rec Commission looks to go into acquisition of property or whatever it is, I do not see that as a problem. Now, if they came and said, we want to borrow money from the general fund in order to make this acquisition, that would be an expenditure from the general fund. You can't borrow from the general fund for that purpose in this case. So it has to come from the other funding source. If the township Parks and Recreation right now had in their designated fund the money to make this match, it wouldn't be an issue either. But since my understanding is they don't, then it will require the seller to be saying, I will be willing, and the township county park, who is saying, yes, we'll agree to some kind of designation for that funds over the next number of years, whatever it works out to be, because the Parks and Rec money is being used for Parks and Rec.
Listen, I totally agree. I was a court administrator in Mount Clemens, so I know line budgeting, I know all of that. So as treasurer of when I was on this Park and Rec, I basically knew that if they gave me a $30,000 budget, that's how much I had to spend. Okay, but that's not the way the system worked back then, is what I'm trying to say, is when the new budget came, I didn't get $30,000. If I came and said I have a bill of $10,000 for something, obviously, it wasn't sitting in an account that was supposed to be used for the Park and Rec, is what I'm trying to say. Now I realize that we're all stuck and we're kind of cleaning this up, but I'm wondering if some of that general, when the voters said, yes, okay, but as long as you're not going to raise taxes and do get into general funding and pay for it, some of it had to be done, and did we violate something maybe back then that we can null this contract?
Well, it's not a question of knowing a contract, it's a question of, the decision was made by the public in a vote, saying, we want this done, but under these conditions.
Right.
That's the criteria by which you evaluate this. And the criteria is that, is this being purchased, in a method by which it's consistent with the ballot? Now, I don't have any information that it hasn't.
Okay.
The only question that comes up is that my understanding is there isn't the money in the Parks and Rec budget right now to make that match. So that fund source has to come from, for example, the county millage, Parks and Rec millage. That's another funding source. And it has to come into the future because the money isn't there now.
Okay, well, they should have gotten a lump sum of money from the county park and rec, the millage part that we all pay for right now. They should have gotten that probably November, December. That money should be kind of sitting someplace.
I don't know. My understanding was that
Okay.
it wasn't there yet.
I
so
guess it's like you're right. As long as it wasn't violated, and if you can honestly feel that, yes, that's the situation, then, we're all set. But I guess my own concern is that I think it might have been.
Well, no, I don't have any information.
Right.
Vi, would you like to speak?
Yes, the money for the park is always budgeted. The problem the Park and Rec had is that they had to come to the board to get permission to spend it. It was not given them as an open budget. The money was always there.
So it was put into the township budget at the beginning of the year.
But they
No
can't-
expenditures could be made without board approval.
That's right.
That would resolve that.
Right.
John, of the 760 people who did vote for the park, were we eligible, or have we received any donations from those people that are wanting this park?
I have no idea of that.
Can they make donations?
Sure. I think you can donate to a township, and you can donate money for a particular purpose if you wish. I don't think that's a problem. I guess I don't, if township Parks and Rec wanted to try to raise money on a volunteer basis for a task, they also take volunteer contributions in kind.
Well, I just wondered out of the 760 if we received anything as a donation if people are wanting the park.
That was never mentioned,
Well,
as
that
far as the
wasn't-
park, no.
A lot wasn't mentioned. We got a one fat paragraph trying to describe hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of park. And everybody's supposed to vote. I look at this, wow, no funds, nothing, just cost me nothing. Wow, yeah, I'll vote yes. I mean, this is a bunch of crap the way it was presented on the ballot. That's all I have to say. I'm not an accountant, and I don't, but, you can't tell me this is not gonna cost me. And even if it costs me $1.50, I'm gonna end up paying for this, for somebody else's use, which we have no use for. I'm sorry.
John, the 35,000 that you're saying that may be spread over the 7 years, is that part of the matching grant?
It would be.
Including that taxes that was paid in 2008?
No, I'm crediting
You're gonna credit
that.
that to the
I'm
other
crediting that as already part of our match.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
Because
that would be
that,
about
yeah.
50,000 then?
50,000 is the match.
Right.
And so I'm saying that that's credited,
Okay.
times of
So
the
we've already
time of the
paid.
sale. And then you have to pay the balance, but we don't have $35,000 to pay that
Right.
balance. So the money that would be paid, it's without having that funding source. I mean, the money for the grants are ready to go from the state and the county. The township has to come up with a formula by which they can make that
Okay, right.
payment. If the seller is willing to take that,
Right.
in an installment payment, maybe, some kind of agreement on that, then I think that, then it goes forward. I mean, it's not a question for us to debate the policy argument, whether it's good or bad, because that decision's been made.
Is there any legal way to rescind this ballot? I mean, by petition or whatever, to bring it up again?
It's like saying you don't like the election results, you want to rescind it. You can't.
Absolutely.
You can't.
But this is really just to buy the property. It is, we're not even starting and having, it's kind of absurd. You buy this piece of property that has all this junk on it. Usually you buy a piece of property that, they've torn it down before, but So what we're talking about is just to buy this property. We're not talking about the steps that we have to take to clean it up, enhance it, and get it to where we want it, right? I mean, this is
Well,
just the purchase price.
Yeah, although it's hard not to recognize that there's $1 million worth of restoration that's gonna be done on the riverfront property. It costs, but, I mean, that's, if they don't do it here, they're going down the road.
Oh, yeah.
I know other townships that are willing to, in fact, they've got other projects that they're willing to put forward.
Sure.
We've got one right here that is set to go, and I would think we would be in a good position on that.
My question was just that what we're talking about right now is just the sale of the property. It has nothing to do with,
Right.
after we buy it, the money that we're gonna be putting into it, or where we'll find that money to match any grants we can go out and try and get.
You know, we
Correct.
did have town hall meetings and stuff, and
Mhm.
people did come that were interested. I mean, this was the time to do that discussion. I mean, I understand.
I
the
think they were
position
there.
we're in now, but, you know, we did have a number of town hall meetings.
And-
There was
and there
somebody
was
here a couple
dissension.
months ago too, who explained all of the government money that's out there, that they want to make that more into a breeding place for fish and everything like they're doing upriver. They're trying to save
No
this
fish
river.
gonna breed on the shores of my river. I live on the river, and if there's any fish breeding by the shore, I'd like to see them. I make it put all the overhang and books and brush they want, there's no fish gonna come there. The fish are breeding on the drop off of the main channel. That's where the fish are, not by the shore. This is not the Rifle River or the, any of the small river.
Well, the whole point is that it was voted on, and the township agreed to purchase the property, regardless of whether or not to maintain it, where the money was gonna come from, or whatever. By law, we have to follow through what's on the ballot. That's what we have to do. We can't violate the law.
Well, you could simply not fill out the application for the next grant, which would automatically rescind it.
There you go.
They would lose
Which
all
would
the
automatically
money.
place the price onto us. It was already voted in. The only option is if the seller does not agree to receiving payment over time. That's the if.
Yeah, the grants have already been approved. We have letters from both the county and the state. That money's been approved. I mean, it's not a gift coming. That money's been approved.
No, I'm talking about the one from the National Oceanic Administration.
Well, that doesn't go to the
Well,
acquisition.
but Michael, if the seller agrees to let us do payments over a period of time, why would we tell the government not to come in and clean it up at no cost to us?
For, as
So you're just
Mr.
gonna leave it barren
As
and
Mr.
not
Kuna said,
maintain your
I mean,
park?
I went to over 550 houses in the township during the campaign, and I can tell you, the people don't want it.
Well, they voted yes, that's the whole thing, it's on the ballot, it's right here.
Right, but they didn't understand it at the time. They didn't
But it
understand
doesn't
it.
matter, it doesn't matter, they don't understand.
But understand this, whatever happens with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration grant wouldn't matter, because that doesn't have to do with the acquisition.
No.
That would go to the maintenance, upkeep, construction, whatever. But so that, if you said no to that, it wouldn't affect this, because this has to do with the acquisition. That isn't to the acquisition. I'm just indicating to you that it is my understanding in talking with Mark Brochu that that is definitely available for consideration, and you evidently had a proposal, you already had somebody here advising you with that. So, I mean, I just, that was a point of information. It didn't have to do with the legal determination here. And I guess the final, I mean, the critical point here is understand that this isn't, you know, if you were to say to me, well, we want you to change this, and find a loophole or whatever, it's not that. It's the decision's been made by the vote. It's not my place, it's not the board's place, it's not your place, quite frankly, to say that, you know, this is the United States. I mean, it was voted on, this was the decision, and unless those conditions can't be met, it goes forward, you know, that's the issue, and my understanding is basically that, you know, if that's worked out and there's an agreement put in place, then the thing goes forward as far as my opinion. I mean, that's my legal opinion.
Doesn't that open us up for a lawsuit too if we back out of?
Well, I mean, the conditions are that it's subject to the will of the people on that ballot proposal. So purchaser as well as anyone, the seller, everybody is subject to that ballot proposal. And if the conditions can't be met, then they can't be met. I mean, I'm not saying that that was the conditions everybody was operating under. And,
So at this point, Joe.
everybody, in my opinion, is acting in good faith. I mean, I commend Mr. Rach and his attorney. I mean, they've raised issues here, and I've responded back to them, and I'm not here to threaten litigation. I don't think they're here either.
But John, the township gets credit back for everything that they've invested in either taxes, surveys, all of that. They get credit back off of.
Well, normally your acquisition, no, for the taxes, in my opinion, the taxes that are credited, that's a typical thing. Some things that when you go in to purchase property, some things are just acquisition. You're going to the environmental aspects and that's kind of like your due diligence. Those are the things that oftentimes are attributed to the purchaser. They want to make sure that's kind of like their insurance policy, that we're not getting into something. So, yeah, those costs have been expended for that purpose, but it's just like anything. You want to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting. I mean, none of us buy a property these days without making sure that, right now you all know that, if you've got a big parcel of property, there's going to be some requirements by the banks that you have some kind of study done to make sure.
Well, are they going to accept the terms of the payments, or
Well,
when is that determination going to be made?
Well, I would expect that we would talk in the next few days and work out the details, and if they can't be worked out, well, that's another matter. But right now, everybody is, this issue about this balance owed has come up rather recently, and we've discussed that, and I've indicated that I think this is the position that we're in, and I don't know of another way to fund it or that can be done in terms of the conditions. Maybe there is, I don't know.
So at this point in time, as a board, should we put a motion to postpone the decision, or do we even need to make a motion for anything? Just wait for your
Decision.
negotiation?
Yeah, the decision's been made, I mean.
No, I mean, with regard to what we need to do right now with this issue. Is this an information only portion?
Yeah,
So we
pretty
don't
much.
have, okay.
Yeah.
So we don't need a motion on this item.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thanks.
Next under new business is audience participation policy, which I believe Michael, is something that you wanted on the agenda.
Yep, I'll move to approve the audience participation policy, which places.
Are you making a motion right now?
Yes.
Oh, hold on. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry. I was kind of listening and not listening.
Yeah, it's okay. I just said I moved to. I move to approve the audience participation policy. Does anyone have any questions about what that involves?
I have a couple questions with regard to that.
Sure.
We have a participation policy already in place, and I, for one, think it is sufficient for the size of our township and for the purposes of the policy. I was looking at yours, Michael, and it concerned me where you have,
There's 4 pages.
yeah, it's the last page, the one that says updated version by trustee Michael Zorn. And it's paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. The last sentence of that says, this applies to a person out of order before a meeting, after a meeting, and at any point while the meeting occurs.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how someone can be out of order when they're not in a meeting. How are you out of order outside of the meeting?
Well, that would be a form of harassment. I mean, this is, something that, as you saw, it almost all comes from the Sterling Heights, but if there's a certain line that you don't particularly want, we can remove it. But
Well, I was just curious, because that's kind of infringing on your First Amendment rights to talk. It kind of sounded like it was, you can't talk before, during, or after the meeting unless I give you permission, and that's not what America is about.
Right, yeah, I can understand that. I was just trying to make sure, one of the attorneys that I had recently spoken with about, at the Michigan Township Association meeting said, you don't want to leave any holes in anything. So I was just trying to make sure every gap was filled. But, the way that everything appears on page 3, that's the virtual translation. That one does not have that particular one.
I personally feel that the policy we have in place now is sufficient, and I don't see a need for restricting people with more restrictions. I mean, we are a very small community. Sterling Heights has, what is it, 129,000 people in a 36.8 square mile area. We have 3,559 people in a 23 square mile area. It's a big difference. I mean, you cram packed, people get irritated real easy, and you may want more, and their board meetings are going to be bigger. So you may want more control over audience participation. I don't feel that we need more control over our audience participation. I like the way the audience had participated tonight. I like that they feel comfortable enough to speak and ask questions. If it gets to a point where it's disruptive, we have every right to pull it in, which we've done many times, to pull it in and say, okay, let's get back on track. So I don't feel we need a need for a new policy on audience participation.
The issue of vulgarity and personal attack, I think those are key wording.
I have yet to observe that.
I've seen it several.
Since we've been
Right here,
Yes,
you heard vulgarity while we were in the board meeting.
yes,
Here?
yes.
Wow.
I've been at the meetings, I have not heard it.
I was at the meetings, and I have tape recordings of the meetings, and I haven't heard it.
I have it on video.
Well, why don't we make a motion?
All right, Michael made a motion.
Michael, you made a motion.
I will second
Can
his
you-
motion.
Michael, can you repeat the motion so we know what it is, please?
Yeah.
Sure. I move to approve the audience participation policy.
And I'll second that. But I also require a roll call vote.
Okay.
Michael?
Aye.
Lori, no. Sandy?
No.
Kelly?
No.
Ken?
No.
We have one yes and 4 no's. Motion failed.
Approval of special assessment assistance from a certified public accountant. That would be you, Sandy.
Going back over the audits the last few years, our auditors have every year asked that we maybe look into our special assessments in the water districts mainly. And kind of, we need to rearrange some of the way the money's going to which accounts. And I'd like to have them work on that. And they've done a proposal to do that with me, hoping to have it done by April 1st, our fiscal year. So we can get going on that in between $2,500 and $3,500.
What was the, oh, that's phase 2. This is a 3-phase.
Right, it's a
And the first
three-phase,
phase was-
it's three
All of them are in
phases.
one fund.
All of them right now, there's a couple of water districts that are in the same fund. We need to separate them
Right.
to comply with the law. Michigan law requires that, and I'm hoping, I think the last 3 years now, they've requested it, something be done. And I'd like to see it corrected.
I think we need to get it corrected. I think also we need to see how much money we have in the budget before we extend any kind of a contract with this type of price tag. So if we could maybe table it until March. I realize it's kind of putting it close to that deadline of April
The
1st,
auditor, you know.
but if we don't have the money in there, I don't want to say,
No, I agree. I was hoping to get it by the fiscal year,
Would that give them enough time?
is a month enough time?
Or can we make a motion to, if we have enough money?
Can we make a motion to, if we have enough money in the budget, we can go ahead.
Yeah, we can do that.
Could it be handled this way? It says it takes $14,000 to do it.
Where does it say $14,000?
That was just another quote from another auditor.
That's
If
for a
we
different
hired,
service.
I was kind of just giving you an idea, if we hired another auditor to help us correct it, it's $120 an hour. But if we go with the existing auditor that we have, he kind of has an idea of,
And they're more familiar with our
They're
things.
familiar.
They've done our audits for the last 4 or 5 years. So they know what we're up against. They have a history knowledge of how our funds are separated and what needs to be fixed. And therefore, with their familiarity, it will take less time for them to do it, so it's going to be cheaper for them to be the ones to
it would be a
do
lot cheaper for them to do it.
Right.
And there's 3 phases of this, we're just voting on the phase 1.
Okay.
For right now, we can go to phase 2 and 3 later on. Phase 1 is just mainly getting those straightened out, and then my office will take it from there and do a lot of the legwork. You know, a lot of the,
Yeah.
you know, I plan on doing a lot of the work myself. But I just want to make sure it's started correctly.
Now, is that something that would need to be done annually, or could we get?
No, just once time it's done.
So
Okay.
it's setting it up so
Yeah,
that
setting
we
it up.
have the right monies coming out of the right account, the right monies going into the right account, so we can
Alright.
track what each water district is doing, as
Okay.
opposed to.
But right now, 2 water districts are together. And they shouldn't really, they should be separated.
They're 2 different assessments, so they should be separated.
Right. All right, I move to approve a special assessment assistant from a certified public accountant.
Is that-
Hold on, we don't want to do it that way. We want a stipulation of if there's money in the budget, so approve the CPA if there's money in the budget. And we are putting a ceiling on the $3,500, and the accountants will let us know.
Yes,
what's
so
going on.
if it goes over the 3,500, we can come back.
Okay, if there's money in the budget to cover the $3,500, is that agreeable? Approve the CPA if there's money in the budget to cover $3,500?
Are you making that motion now?
No, it's Michael's motion, not his.
Yes. Yes.
Do you want her to reread it so you?
No,
Oh.
that's fine.
I just read it. Okay, and that was seconded by Sandy?
Yes.
Okay.
I have to do a roll. It's money.
Actually, the only time you really need to do a roll call is if it's a resolution. You
Okay.
can request a roll call. You don't have to do roll calls for anything including money unless it's done by resolution.
Okay. So, well, then let's just vote on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okey-dokey.
Spring cleanup note with check off list. This I do believe also was out on the table, the literature for anybody.
Let me switch my tape.
Okay.
Let me know when we got it.
Okay.
All right, I made the motion to approve I move to
Are you
approve.
gonna read your number first? Just in case some people didn't get the,
Oh,
is that okay?
Oh, did you
Sure.
not get it out there?
We'll put them out there, but in case some people
Oh.
grab it.
well, basically,
okay?
yes, yeah, you know, obviously Cottrellville Township has some severe problems with blight. And one of the best townships out there is, or excuse me, places out there is Mount Clemens. And they have this excellent newsletter that someone submitted, gave to me, and it you know, has this nice article here and talks about how important it is for spring cleaning. And then also, it gave this checkoff list. And it seemed like a fantastic idea. I thought, if possible, we could do it in the next newsletter, if possible. This was something that Lori and I talked about. Maybe you'd have to think that at least, if money was an issue, we would have to send it to the 86 people who were specifically cited for light violations last spring. But I also since then thought, well, perhaps if there wasn't enough money to do it in a newsletter or a mailer, it could be placed in a voice advertisement.
The checklist?
Yes, I mean, depending on what the budget is, because again, it's tough to figure out, unless we voted to put it in the newsletter, the way Mount Clemens did. We couldn't, for now, because we don't have the, budget, we can't just say, hey, let's send out a mailer. But the voice advertisement probably would be inexpensive enough, especially considering spring is around the corner, it would make sense to do this.
Any discussion?
I also have a question with regard to this checkoff list.
Yes.
In the memo that you have attached to it, the first paragraph, the last sentence, this checklist outlines the uses, structures, activities, and conditions that are defined as blight by the Cottrellville Township ordinances. I looked through your checklist, and you have 13 check boxes. Of the 13, 9 of them are not in our ordinance.
Possibly not for blight, like, for example, like some of the vehicle ones, those don't appear in blight, which is ordinance 72, but they were in ordinance 68, which is vehicle.
But you can't represent to people that this is our ordinance when it's not. You can't, for instance, the infestation of any property or premises by insects. I need insects to germinate my pear trees. I was very unhappy I had no pears last summer. And if I have no insects, I mean, people are gonna take this to the literal, which is something you know.
Right, yeah.
So you can't give a checkoff list saying this is an ordinance when 9 of these aren't even in our ordinance. And if you're gonna combine the 2 ordinances, then you have to outline that. But this is too restricting. This is like saying, all right, you 82 people that we had a complaint on, we're watching you, that's called harassment.
Right, well, the comment that I sent you in the original outline, it mentioned some of those things, that this would need to be examined. So that's why I was actually surprised when we sent it and allowed it on this month's agenda rather than next month's.
Well, no, you asked me why it wasn't gonna be on there, so.
Well, we can table it till next month, and we'll get everything all set with the exact wording to make sure it all lines up with not just ordinance 72, but ordinance 68.
Did we have 82
I'm sorry?
violations last spring?
86.
86?
Well, that's nice.
I have 72, which is blight elimination.
He's making a reference to
No, how many
the spring.
violations do we have?
Oh, Michael gave me a number of 82 or 86.
Yeah, that number actually changed a couple times. I remember the former trustee, Bernie Falk, used to always say 86, and then another previous board member used to always say 82. But
Isn't that the word for throwing something away? Let's 86 it. Just an observation.
So we had 86
yeah,
blight
probably.
tickets issued last year?
No, these are people that they drove around, the 2 trustees and the supervisor, and they took pictures, and there was a big packet that was all stapled together.
It's on record?
Yes.
And those 86 people were aware of it?
I don't know if they were aware of it. Mr. Clausen rarely goes out and cites things like that, although, we're going to hope to improve that.
Mr. Clausen cannot go out and cite those things unless he has a signed complaint.
Actually,
If there's 86 signed complaints, he will go out and look at each and every one of them.
that's actually incorrect.
No, it's not incorrect.
Mr. Clausen always says that. However, Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 in the book Municipal law from the Michigan Township Association makes it clear that a complaint does not have to come from a neighbor and pit neighbors against each other in order for the ordinance enforcement officer to do his job.
But we have Cottrellville has an ordinance that
That's precedent
states
or
that
policy,
if
then
somebody,
that's how you do it.
that
You
if
have to
somebody-
have a signed complaint in order for it to be investigated.
we have an ordinance that states that,
And Mr. Jim Beelan from the Michigan Township Association told me that is essentially illegal. He said that cannot be paid attention to, so.
Well, I guess we'll just
well,
have to look
there's,
into that.
yes,
How can you put Mount Clemens against Cottrellville Township? That's a city, this is country. You got farmers, you're gonna have machinery, you're gonna have tractors, maybe a truck that's broke down. You can't put
it's
the
not
township
comparable.
to a city.
Nothing that you named is.
And obviously, you never went to Mount Clemens to look at the abandoned buildings, the ones in the fire, the grass in the yards that are this tall.
That's what they're talking about, you gotta get.
You gotta clean up your own yard before you go and try to clean up somebody else's.
One at a time, one at a time. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Barnes.
I would like to say that these ordinances of blight don't mean nothing because the ones we have haven't been followed, okay? One example I mentioned a long time ago to the board of trustees, or the board here, you take the last one on the thing about abandoned buildings. Go down on the corner of Shea Road
Right.
and start it, okay?
Yeah.
If they want me to take it down, I'll take it down for scrap. I mean, the gutters are hanging, the windows are falling out, the things are going over, and it's not been taken care of.
Yep, and that actually, the really terrible thing on that one is that property is owned by from what I've been told, by the former.
I don't think it matters who's on
Yeah,
it.
okay,
It's
well-
just,
So I don't care who owns it or what, I mean,
Exactly.
it's very common when people drive to that store to buy their pizzas or see something like that, and it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. But what I'm saying is, why are we worrying about quibbling over what's blight and what's not, when we don't even enforce what we have? If we got one thing on the book, we haven't even enforced it, so.
That's what I think Mr. Kunith is talking about. We
How
have to
about-
get some bite behind our ordinances.
how about we'll, listen to Pat and then that'll be our next thing.
Well, just one comment, the storage of unlicensed motor vehicles, boats, recreational vehicles, you're, in the country, you're allowed one unlicensed vehicle for
Right.
one thing, so that doesn't fall into that. And the storage of a licensed operable vehicle, recreation on grass or dirt, when you live in the country, that's what it is, grass
Where are you
and
gonna
dirt.
put it?
You know, in the city, that'd be a different story, but in the country, that's what it is, grass and dirt. You're not gonna lay cement to park a vehicle if you have an area that is, I mean, it's mute, really. And the other thing is, you know, those 86 cited areas, actually, Mr. McNamee said last year that the majority of them weren't enforceable in court.
Yeah.
Because, and that's what we need to focus on, the things that are really blight and are dangerous buildings, things that are really important. People move out here for the purpose of having a little bit of freedom so that they don't, and if your neighbor's not complaining, you're not offending your neighbor. And it doesn't, it falls within our anti-blight ordinance, you know. You don't have a leg to stand on.
Isn't the planning commission working on a new blatant ordinance?
Well, the anti-blight ordinance actually is done, it should be, I have a list for you, I just said. It was, the planning commission was done with it, I think in June. It was sent to the board sometime in the early fall, so I believe that we're completing.
Well, maybe we could look at what they're working on and see what's in here that's comparable, cross out, you know, see
Well,
what's in there that's missing.
What you
And
have to do
then
is,
what John thinks can be enforced.
when you make a self-test like that, it has to be comparable to the
To
area.
what our ordinance.
You can't take something from Mount Clemens or Sterling Heights
Well-
or, you know, or another township that is not the same as ours. This is basically a farming and a riverfront.
And you also can't make this if it doesn't fall within our blight ordinance. And also, I agree with you about being able to enforce it.
Right.
That's where the help comes with looking
Police
into
car
our law
pulls up and the cop
enforcement.
gets out and hands them a ticket, that gets their attention.
And I think maybe before, as we're working on the blight ordinance, that's something that I can take to whomever, the sheriff's department, the police department, and ask them, is this something that, are we doing something that you're able to enforce?
Yeah, possibly what Pat said, if we could get it before the planning
Right.
commission, we could go over this, would that be
Right.
happy to?
And then be able to go to the different
Clean up
law
note?
enforcement agencies and ask, hey, what are you able to, I mean, we're all pretty much aware from doing our research and that, but to make sure that we're on the same page and we're being told the
There
same
has to
thing.
be a way to approach it without putting people on the defensive.
Exactly.
Or we can take that around.
And on the planning commission, we did have it, and that was one of our big discussions of enforcement. And we would be thrilled to find out if there was a way to enforce it without having to go to the
Right.
cost of having to hire police in our township that are gonna be here, 8 hours just to enforce blight? And what's gonna happen the other 16 hours? That's where the problem is.
And what do we gain if we litigate blight? The most we would get is $500. Most judges charge $50.
There has to be an incentive way
Yeah.
to get the blight taken care of without putting people on the defensive and in a big uproar, neighbor against neighbor. There has to be a way to do it.
Right.
Well, do you want to make a motion, Michael,
Well,
to,
there were a couple of things that Mrs. Runyon mentioned.
sorry.
One, you're correct. I talked to a couple of attorneys at a law firm in Detroit at the Michigan Township Association.
So you're talking about Detroit again.
No, that's where the conference was.
If you had a job, you wouldn't have so much time to do all this stuff.
That's
right.
That's
terribly rude.
And see, that's the sort of stuff I hear from,
it should be.
for example, this fall.
I thought it was just rude.
It was.
Enough!
That's why we need the audience participation.
Another thing that was brought up as an idea, a thought, and actually Peggy Hansen brought it up years ago, was that if somehow we could form some kind of group association. Association group that could, because a lot of those blight areas are possibly abandoned properties, but other of them are elderly people that really can't and don't have help. And by taking them to court, all you're making is more aggravation and stress in their lives. So, I mean, there maybe could be a way of doing it.
Like a community volunteer
A community
day or.
way. Yes.
Go ahead,
Type of
Mike.
thing.
You know, and helping people out. I think that would be something we need to look at. We could get young people involved in it, and be really good people involved in our township. So,
Okay, one more bite, then we're gonna move on.
You have to take into consideration that out here in Cottrellville, we come under the Right to Farm Act. And that act eliminates a lot of things that
Which
can be done.
I would hope would be in our blight ordinance from our planning
There's a
commission.
copy of
They
it
know that.
in there was a big class up in Fort York, the citizen group gave out of Lansing. And you're very limited to what you can do if it's designated farmland.
I think it's 30 acres or more.
Which I'm sure all of that would be in consideration when they're doing the blight ordinance.
The thing I was going to say to Mrs. Runyon was at the conference, which was in Detroit, not necessarily attorneys from Detroit, but the man, he represents 82 townships with his law firm. He was talking about how the civil enforcement of ordinances is not always the way to go. For a lot of those things, you want to do things with making it a misdemeanor to violate those ordinances.
So did you want to make a motion for something?
No, I think we'll table it until we get things in line with ordinance 68 and 72.
So do you want a motion to table, or do you want to try and get something, fix some things and quirk it and tweak it and then come back with it again?
Yeah, we'll table it till next
So,
week.
till the next meeting?
Yes,
Okay, so we need a motion.
because that's really what I anticipated anyway. It was kind of a surprise.
All right, so you're making a motion to table this until the March meeting?
Yes.
All right, hold on.
All in favor?
We need a second.
Oh, I second it.
No? Aye.
All right.
Aye. Do you want to table it? Or are you, no? Motion carries to table it till next month. Okay. Supervisor report.
No, we got
Oh, we got one more.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Oh, you're
Keep
just
this thing, I
hoping.
know, I'm like, let's go. Are you, do you want to discuss this one? Or buy, or what do you
Buy or
guys?
Beth, what? We're on item number 5. Do you want to say anything with regard to what your recommendation is for the,
Let me get my copy.
if you want, I can hand you mine.
No, I have something, this one. Because you have to make a decision tonight on that.
When are your 45 days up?
Just a minute, let's see. I have to look it up.
When did you guys first meet? The 1st of February or the last part of January?
January. Yeah, we met in January. No, because I had put it for the March meeting, and Don came back and he said it's got to be at this meeting.
Do we have a couple of days between now and?
It's 45 days after our first meeting.
That was one of my last days we could do that. I think today was like the last day that we wanted that.
Yeah, that was supposed to be the last day to meet the commission.
And so we have 30 days whether or not we accept it or reject it.
No.
Yes, we have 30
Yeah,
days.
we had to get it to you.
Right.
Yeah, you have 45 days to get it done, and then we have 30 days to.
Right.
Yeah, 30 days to cut, we had to get it, we had to get it to you. We took into consideration that education, knowledge of the position you were in, and what the most important aspect of that position is, interaction with the residents of the townships, and goals for the townships. And the only thing we really stressed was the education of classes pertaining to their position that we would like the township to continue, and that was one of the most important backgrounds that we looked at.
I belong to the MTA Academy, so in less than a year and a half, I'll be certified as a township supervisor by the MTA.
Okay.
But nobody asked me, so I just wanted you to know, I don't think you were aware of that.
No,
So,
we didn't.
yeah, because I didn't know that, I don't think, whoever didn't tell you that.
We did ask though, what aspects of your life, you know, would benefit the township? I mean, what have you done in your life,
But
you know?
aspects of, is not the same as education.
Well, I don't know how we ask it, but
I'm
they give
not
it.
saying anything.
I want to say
Just let
something
you know
here,
what my
and
education
Jess, right now. The education is getting the big talk about, okay? It wasn't the intention to put it in the application like that. It's nice to know what experience people have. The salaries and stuff that we voted on, and personally myself was on the duties of the office that had to be performed compared to the other people in other townships of the same size with like duties. So it was the duties, not how you did it. I don't care if you only had a kindergarten education, if you could do the job, that was fine. It was
Well, the way
you get paid.
kindergartners are today, you could.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, so it was based on the job that has to be done and the duties.
Oh, so this wasn't like in an order?
No.
No,
Okay.
that was just something like when you read, when everybody ran from office, they put a little briefing about their scenario or their life or their education or whatever, okay? That was just one thing we looked at, but the main thing was the duties of the job and the office and the responsibilities of the job.
I would like to say thank you for all of you who
Yes.
served on the compensation commission, because that was something you did of your own free will. You didn't get compensated for, and you put in a lot of time and effort, and we do appreciate everything that you've done for that. And with that, I would make a motion that we postpone our decision until we find out how much money we have in our budget.
Second.
Oh, but,
No, you can't.
no, we have 30 days.
Oh, we do have three.
We
No,
have
we
30
had
days.
45 days from the time the time we stopped to present the board with our recommendations.
And you can have a special meeting to
Right.
make this decision. You don't have to wait till March.
Oh, I thought tonight was the night that we had to make the decision.
budget.
Right.
Yeah.
So once you do the budget, if you see it's,
Oh, all right.
You have to vote to accept that, we gave it to you.
Right.
Today was our day, we had to have it in.
And Vi, I don't believe you read for the audience's information what the recommendation was for the,
can I just say one thing, when you have that meeting, please put a notice on the door, so if anybody wants to be there.
oh yeah, we all, we do.
Okay, but what we took and came forward with would be effective the 1st of April, if they approve it and accept it, is the supervisor would remain at her salary, the treasurer would get a $1,000 increase, the clerk would get a $1,000 increase.
1,500.
For
No,
2013.
You're on the wrong page.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, and the trustees would remain at their salary. Both the clerk and the treasurer would get a $1,000 raise. The rest would remain at what they had.
Then the second, that would be the first year, the second year.
That's the first year. The second year, the supervisor would remain as is. The treasurer would get, and the clerk would each get a $500 raise, and the trustees would remain at what they are. But you people, if you don't accept this, can vote for yourself then. This is our recommendation, but it doesn't mean they have to accept it.
Right.
One thing I would like to say is that during our interviews with the board members, I was very impressed by their need to kind of look into things and get things straightened out. Just kind of clean it up, and I'm so grateful to you for all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, we all were,
Yes.
including Don Armstrong.
Yeah, he's down, yes.
I had 2 reams of paper go through my
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to do that.
And for the audience's information, the supervisor's current rate of pay is $29,500 per year. The treasurer's current rate of pay is $24,000 per year. If we accept this, it would go to $25,000 per year. Clerk's is $24,000 per year, would go to $25,000 if we accept it. The trustees receive $2,700 per year.
And if they want to change it where you don't have a commission, these are, according to the law, if you accept it, these are the raises. If you don't, you stay wherever you're at right now, period, okay? But if you want, you don't have to have a commission, you can, in the future, you can vote before the next commission comes up, that you want to set your own salaries, and you can do that. But right
We
now,
would have to dismantle the commission by
Right.
amendment, so.
right, or however you do
Or
it, but I'm saying,
resolution.
but it's a possibility. So there was 2 options, either
Right.
by a board or by a commission.
Thank you. So do I have a second on my motion, and I'll read my motion again so we all understand it. I recommend we postpone our decision until we have finished looking over the 2013-2014 budget to see where we stand in regard to the budget.
Second.
Ooh, I got 3 seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That's a roll call.
Oh, thank you. I can't see you.
You should. It's not a resolution. It's not a resolution, it's just a motion to postpone the decision.
Oh, okay, because if you were holding on to it.
Yeah, no, we have resolutions for that. So it's all A's. Okay.
Board member comments. Oh, wait, sorry. There we go again. Public comments on any agenda item.
I think the township does need a park on the river. It's my opinion.
Apparently, that's with the boat payment.
I know that you're in the budget process right now for the new fiscal year, and obviously, you know, we're going to be buying this property because we're liable for it either way.
Only if he agrees to the payments. If he doesn't want the payments, then it's done.
Okay.
But that was the thing. It was.
But you
it's
might,
the
you know,
final-
while you're doing your budgeting for your park, you might think of trying to budget that money that will be the partial payment as some backup for you, as a suggestion.
Oh, absolutely.
That if you can try and include some of that, because you're still gonna have this liability, and to be honest with you, if this whole thing goes no, you don't know that they might not
Right,
lawsuit
if he doesn't accept the payment. Plus, the other thing is, when I found this out, part of what I was discussing with him was if he were to accept this payment, because then we can't get out of it, to please consider us repaying him in small amounts, so that way we still have money to work on the township park. And
Right.
that's why we came up with, okay, if we get 15,000 a year, would he go 7 a year, so that way we're still able to, because we don't have any revenue generated from our park, so that way
Well,
we'd still have some money.
And I know you don't have any people in the park and rec who've had experience, and I'm very here for the winter. I'm leaving Monday, and I won't be back until after your budget is over. Where, you know, perhaps we used to sit and negotiate and try and project, you know, projects and so forth to give you any help with that. But considering that you have that responsibility, my suggestion is if you're able to find some money to steal from someplace else to stick in there, that, you
We've
know.
been working on that. We have a lot of things coming up, but
Good.
we don't want to mention them until we're
No,
done
no,
with
I
this, because you
totally
don't
agree.
know. You're kind of at a standstill, but still
Exactly.
getting works in progress on some ideas that we have planned.
And the other suggestion is that you try and get your blight ordinances in place before we become owners of this property and we are blight people.
Oh, that's a good point.
I'll have it rearranged to get the ordinances
Did
are
you,
labeled.
um,
Right.
Did you have something, Jeff? TK? No?
Where's your mayor?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Where's this property at?
The property, it's right, just past Roberts Road.
It would be south of Roberts.
South of Roberts Road and Waterside. And then there's the cabins directly across from that, which back up to the bike path in the state road.
Not that I'm saying you guys don't deserve a raise, but how can you put in for a raise when everybody else is taking cuts in pay and people, you know, with families and all that, their insurance is almost gone and they have to take a cut in pay? I'm just curious.
And that's why we said that we need to look into the budget to see what we have, because we don't want to take away from something else that we really need, because they don't need a raise. We think, no. But, you know, to try, so I agree with you. I think the compensation was just fair on the basis that I don't have experience, and with me attending these classes, that's the reason why I joined the academy. I didn't want to just go to classes and use the township's money. I'd rather go to classes to where I become accredited and get a certificate through the Township Association. Gives myself more confidence, and I hope that it'll give the community more confidence that, you know, I spent 2 years going and certified. So then maybe someone will come and ask me a question, instead of me asking someone. Any more public comments? Okay, board member comments. Laura, you have anything?
Do you have any supervisor comments?
No, I've had plenty. I'm done. I would like to thank Matt for helping me, putting all that time and effort into everything. And I'd like to thank TK for keeping an eye on the roads and looking and monitoring that aspect while I was busy chasing other things. And the Compensation Commission for all their work. I know you guys are so happy when I asked you to be on the board. And that's all I have, Sandy.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Anything?
I think we all appreciate it.
Michael?
Well, yeah, you know, Lori, as far as the existing policy, to keep it in mind, the main thing that I liked about the Sterling Heights one was that it was simply, you know, printed on every agenda. You know, is that something with the existing one you would agree to?
To print the audience participation on every agenda?
Yes, just.
It's sitting on the table. It's been sitting on the table every single meeting.
Then we have to use more time.
Well, no, it doesn't say the policy of behavior, you know, that's asked of people on the agenda.
Oh, you mean on the agenda that you gave me the example of, that said at the bottom?
Yes.
See the policy or something like that?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that.
Would you like to vote on that then?
I don't think it needs to be voted on. I can just put it on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's really
That's
all I
kind of
was
like
trying to
saying,
obtain.
this is the agenda?
Everybody said, make a motion for adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting at 9:02 p.m.
I second. We need a vote for adjournment. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carries.